Last class, we started discussing multi-electron atoms, and in particular, we were discussing the spectrum of helium atom, which is a two-electron atom. Okay, and we introduced the new concept of a multi-electron wave function. Okay, which is a slightly different idea than the concept of a single electron wave function. And the important part of a multi-electron wave function was the permutation symmetry, that the interchanging two particles in let's say real space, or in terms of the multi-particle wave function, interchanging the coordinates representing two particles, etc., that plays an important role, uh, particularly if your systems are indistinguishable. If the systems are indistinguishable, if the particles are indistinguishable, then it should not matter that I labeled particle 2 as 1 and particle 1 as 2, basically. So the wave function should be have should not change the physical properties, etc. And that immediately gave rise to the fact that if I apply this permutation twice, etc., then I should recover the old wave function, etc. And that implies that the permutation after acting on the wave function should just give me just a pure phase. Okay, and we found that nature, we find that if this pure phase is either 1 or -1, then those cases are particularly important, in such a way that the total wave function can either be symmetric or antisymmetric. If the total wave function is symmetric, then it is called bosons. The particles are called bosons. And if it is antisymmetric, then the particles are called fermions. So this we discussed at length in the last class, etc. Then we explicitly showed that, since the total wave function is a product of spatial part and the spin part, basically, uh, so the total wave function has to be antisymmetric for electronic systems. That implies that the spatial part can be symmetric or antisymmetric. And in particular, for the hydrogen atom, this has the label of para for the symmetric spatial wave function, and ortho for the antisymmetric spatial wave function. And similarly, spins can also be symmetric or antisymmetric. And accordingly, we constructed the spin states, etc., which are either a singlet or a triplet, basically. So the triplets were the symmetric part and the singlet was the antisymmetric part. So we did all of this explicitly in the last class, etc. And then we discussed briefly about the Pauli exclusion principle. And we had just started discussing the energy levels of hydrogen atom at the level of independent electron levels, etc. And we will continue from there. Okay. So we will continue with the energy levels of the helium atom. And then we will, jump a bit and go to, review the energy bands of, multi-electron atoms. In particular, we will discuss one scheme for getting better energy levels, which is called the central force approximation. And then we will come back to the hydrogen atom in the next class, etc., to calculate its ground state energy, at least perturbatively, and using variational principle, etc. And then, yeah, do similar calculations for multi-electron atoms, basically. So that's the plan for today and roughly the next week also, basically. Okay. So let's go to discuss the energy levels of helium-like atoms. Okay. So this, I think we already discussed in the last class some bit. So I, did not prove, but if you take the full wave functions, etc., then we can show that, the optical transitions are forbidden between the singlets and the triplet states of the helium atom, or for, atoms with have low Z, basically. Okay. And since the, optical transition are completely separated between singlet and the triplet states, etc., then for hydrogen atom, or for helium atom, you can think of, ortho states as one set and para states as one, basically. And optical transitions will never mix these states, basically. Okay. In fact, this was so well observed in experiments, etc., that in the early days, etc., we had the notion that helium appears in two sort of forms. One is called parahelium and one is called orthohelium, etc. Okay, and parahelium has one kind of spectrum and orthohelium has another kind of experiment. Let's say spectra. And when we do generic experiments, etc., we will either observe this set or that set, etc. So that was it. And then let's discuss the angular momentum, etc. So, and this notation, I think we discussed in the last class. So the angular momentum now becomes for two electron system, the angular momentum of 1 plus angular momentum of 2. So the total L, okay. And this is two particle angular momentum. So this is slightly different from the, hydrogen atom angular momentum. And the notation is typically used is capital L as its eigenvalue. So L square has eigenvalue of L plus 1 h bar square. So h bar is probably missing here. Okay, so h bar square, and ml belongs to minus capital L to plus L. And typically the notation that is used to denote the helium atom energy levels is basically this. So principal quantum number, so n is equal to 1, 2, 3, etc. And then L with the left subscript superscript of 2s plus 1, which is the multiplicity of the spin, etc. Okay. So the notation for L is basically 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so the total angular momentum can be sum of these, etc. Yeah, just give me a minute. There is a class in progress today. Yeah, sorry about that. So L denotes the total angular momentum, and in the hydrogen atom for one electron we had SPDF, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and total L when I combine 2 electrons can go up to 7, 8, etc. So for a helium atom we will get states which are capital S, capital P, capital D, capital F, capital G, and H, etc. And the para levels, the spin singlet levels, basically the 2s plus 1 has to correspond to s is equal to 0, so 1 basically. So these are the para levels, and similarly these are the ortho levels basically. Okay, para level space part is symmetric and spin part is singlet or antisymmetric, and ortho level space part is antisymmetric and spin part is symmetric or spin triplets basically. Okay. Okay, then the simplest approximation that you can make for energy levels, let's say, for the hydrogen atom problem is that, we can write it as H0 plus H prime. And let's say H0 you say is the sum of, single particle energy levels H1 and H2, where H1 is this minus S squared del 2 by 2m minus Z squared by 4 pi epsilon Ri, etc. And H prime is basically the electron-electron interaction, R12 term basically. Okay. And then let's say, I completely throw away H prime. Okay, so let's completely throw away the electron-electron interaction. Yeah, sorry.
Why is there Z in H prime as well? If there is electron
Oh,
electron.
sorry. So that is a typo. So that's my mistake, basically. Yeah. So there should not be a Z here. Okay. There should not be any Z here in H prime. Okay. So thank you for pointing that out. Okay. Yeah, so that's just electron-electron interaction. So that should just be E square by 4 pi epsilon naught R12. Okay. Okay. So then the starting point is that you throw away the H prime and just, I can think of it, separate hydrogen atom energy levels and work with that, basically. Work with that. Plus I can use this concept of symmetrization, etc. And that already gives me some nice physics. Okay. So then for each, let's say hi, small hi, which is single electron wave function, I'll have this kind of eigenstates E ni, psi ni, li, mi, etc., where E ni is half of z square by ni square, etc., right, in atomic units and so on. Okay, then we can yeah, so that's the idea. So we neglect this thing, etc., H prime, so that my Hamiltonian is sum, and consequently the wave function can be a product wave function basically, right? So that's just like separation of variables trick. As long as I can write the Hamiltonian as a sum of three distinct terms, etc., which do not mix with each other, then the wave function I can write is product wave function of each of these separately, basically. So use the same trick, etc. Then you start getting this kind of energy levels. So En1 plus En2, which is minus Z square by 2, 1 by N1 square plus 1 by N2 square in sort of what is called the atomic unit. So atomic unit is double of the Rydberg, basically. So 2 times the 13.6 EV. Okay. So the 2 takes care of that 2 in the atomic unit, and yeah. So Z squared by 1 by N1 square plus 1 by N2 square. Okay. Okay. And then the idea is that this kind of a product wave function cannot be the actual wave function, right? Because it needs to, commute with the, it needs to be an eigenfunction of the permutation operator, the wave function basically. Okay. And if you apply P12 to this kind of a wave function, then you say that, the R1, R2 you interchange, or the labels you interchange, the N1 and L1, M1. So the box in which the particle was present, you can change basically, or that implies that, since P12 commutes with the H, then E0, N1, N2 should have the same energy as E0 of N2, N1, basically. Okay. So that gives rise to a sort of a degeneracy, and this is called exchange degeneracy. So this is there in helium kind of an atoms always, basically. Okay. So exchange degeneracy, which arises because of this permutation symmetry. And then you can, demand, since if I actually want to construct real two particle wave functions out of these products, etc., then I need to actually symmetrize them. Okay. And if I symmetrize them, then I can follow the same principle that I did earlier from single particle wave function products. So I can write the product plus the P12 times the same product, or product minus P12 times the same product, basically. Okay. So I get a plus term and a minus term, basically. And obviously the plus term is the symmetric in the space wave function. This is a para wave function, and the psi minus is the antisymmetric in space, or the orthogonal ortho wave function, basically. Okay. And then just based on this para and ortho, etc., we can make some conclusion. Which is, let's talk about the ground state, let's say. So if both electrons are in the n is equal to 1 state, then n1 is equal to n2 is equal to 1. So that would be the ground state. Both the electrons are in the 1s like state, let's say. Okay. And if n is 1, then L1 and L2 have to be 0. And consequently, M1 and M2 have to be 0, basically. Okay. What does it mean that L1 and L2 have to be 0 and M1 and M2 have to be 0? That the state will always be in a spin singlet state, because only for a spin singlet state, I will have a total M as 0, basically, right? So if it is a spin singlet state, then the spatial part has to be antisymmetric. Okay. But if it's the spatial part is antisymmetric, then if N1, L1, M1 is equal to N2, L2, M2, then this term minus this term just becomes 0. So that completely vanishes, basically. Okay. What does it imply? It implies that this state can never be the ground state. Okay. So in the ground state of hydrogen atom, I can only have the psi plus state, or the symmetric state, basically. Okay. And this is the most prominent example of this Pauli exclusion principle, that two electrons must be with opposite spins, etc., so that their spin part of the wave function is antisymmetric, because in the same level, the antisymmetrized wave function, etc., the spatial part will vanish. Okay. So that's the origin of your Pauli exclusion principle, if you like. Okay. And the consequence is that the ground state, only the para state, which is in the spin singlet state, is allowed. Okay. But if you go to excited states, let's say, so the first excited state in which one electron is in the n is equal to 1 level, and the other electron can be in higher levels, etc., etc. So that the first electron has a 1-0-0 state, and the other electron can have any of the N, LM states, etc. Then all combinations are allowed, ortho, para, both, etc. And the energy levels of E10, so 0 superscript is, this is like 0th order calculation. I've not included electron-electron interactions, spins, orbit coupling, spin-spin coupling, and all that. Okay. So in that sense, so that just becomes z square by 2, 1 plus 1 by n square. Okay. And this gives rise to the whole series of degenerate ortho and para states, basically. Okay. So that's the hydrogen atom energy levels. And yeah, so if you look at the, let's say, the figure, then it looks something like this, let's say. So do I make it small? Okay, yeah. So it will look like something like this, let's say. Okay. So for the spin singlet, right, the space part has to be, so spin singlet is antisymmetric. So the space part has to be antisymmetric. So all the ortho states are here, and all the para states are here, basically. So they are, you can almost think of them separately, etc. And between the ortho and the para, the energies are sort of slightly shifted. This will not come out in our current calculation, 0th order, etc. But this will come out as soon as we start including the electron-electron interactions, etc. Okay. So the ortho and the para state for, two and different L, let's say, etc., So the total L is same, 2, 2, but the spin multiplicity, total spin is different, etc. You will already start seeing splitting basically. Similarly in 2,1p and 2,3p. And similarly in all the higher levels, etc. Okay, and this splitting primarily comes from this electron-electron interaction, which we have not included right now. But let's try to include that, and let's try to think of the physics which will happen if we go beyond the single particle picture. Let's say, okay. If I go beyond, then I have to include this, So one approach is that let me start from the symmetrized wave function of the non-interacting picture, and treat this E square by 4 pi epsilon and R12 as a perturbation. Okay. So this perturbation is sort of positive. So it increases the energy of all states. That is number one. And then the way to calculate is I'll start from the independent particle approximation and treat this as a perturbation basically. Okay. And the problem with this approach is S prime may not be perturbative actually. No, the physical number that comes out of the energy separation, etc., may be very high. Okay. And I already explicitly gave you the number for this, etc. So the ground state energy of He helium atom turns out to be roughly 80 electron volts, and this perturbative energy correction, meaning if I do not include this, etc., then the ground state energy will turn out to be roughly 110 or something like that. So there's a 30 EV difference over a scale of 80 EV because of this. So this may not exactly be perturbative. Okay. Okay. But it turns out that this will still, so the perturbation theory still, captures a good amount of this change in energy for the hydrogen helium atom, basically. Okay. But if you keep going to, atoms with larger number of electrons, then the combinations of R12, so the possibility, one electron interacts with 2, one interacts with 3, one interacts with 4, 2 interacts with 3, 2 interacts with 4. So that combination actually, so increases this perturbation very significantly. And for multi-electron atom, generally you cannot treat this as a perturbation. For helium atom, it still gives you a nice answer and takes you closer to the actual value, ground state value. But in more than 2 electrons systems, this generally doesn't work. Okay. And then there's another sort of calculation scheme, which is called central field approximation. Okay. So we will discuss this in detail today for multi-electron atoms. But here I just wanted to demonstrate, let's say, so the total H, let me write in terms of sort of, a new combination. So H0 tilde and H prime tilde. So these are slightly different from the H0 and H prime defined above. So H0, let me write as, the kinetic term plus some general, I do not know the form, but no, some central potential basically. So some central force field basically. Okay. So VR1 and VR2. Okay. So if I just do this addition, then H prime becomes, the electron-electron interaction, let's say. Okay. So again, there is typos. So basically, yeah. So VR includes everything. So all the potential, etc. So whatever terms I have missed will go in H prime. So H prime will start having terms like, E square by 4 pi epsilon naught R12 minus Z square by 4 pi epsilon naught R1. So the nucleus interaction, etc. Then I added a VR1. So I have to subtract out the VR2 and so on, basically. Okay. And then minus Z by R2. And then I had added a VR1. So I need to subtract out the VR2. So that's it basically. Okay. And the idea is that we just added and subtracted this VR1 and VR2 to rewrite the full equation. Okay. And till now, there's no trick. This is exact. I've just added and subtracted a term. And the idea is that, I can now choose VR according to some physical intuition or according to some sophisticated calculation, etc., such that this H prime becomes a perturbation. Actually, physically also it becomes a perturbation, meaning if I calculate the expectation value of H prime in the eigenbasis of H0, then the energy calculated will not diverge and things like that. Okay. But right now, there's just a mathematical trick, and why it becomes physical, we'll see in a minute. Okay. So of course we can try different values of VR, and that may give us different answers for the ground state energy, etc. Okay. And this approach will work very well for multi-electron system. In fact, I'm going to discuss today itself quite a bit of this, etc. And then let's think a bit physically. Okay. So of course, maths is good, etc. But we are physicists, so let's think physically. So what will happen if I have an extra electron in the atom? Okay, so an extra electron should screen the charge of the nucleus, which will be seen by the other electron. Right? If it does, then let's say it screens the nuclear charge by some amounts s basically. Okay, then I would guess, for example, that Vr should be of this form. So Vr is Z goes to screen something, so Z minus S divided by 4 pi epsilon naught R, where this S is some screening constant, etc. Or what you can define is a new variable Ze, which is the screened, let's say, effective charge basically, seen by the nucleus, and Vr is given now in terms of Ze by 4 pi epsilon naught R, and that is just so in this equation, if I just put Vr is equal to minus Ze by 4 pi epsilon naught R, then this first part basically just becomes the hydrogen atom problem with a new charge, some screen charge, etc. Okay, and if I solve that, then I'll just get this energy. Okay, and the ground state energy I'll just get as minus Ze square, for example. Okay, so let me just push this a bit more, etc. And actually, let me assume that if this were correct, then how does it compare with the actual ground state energy? Okay, so we find that if you choose this Ze is equal to 1.70, okay, instead of Z is equal to 2, which is the nuclear charge on the helium atom, okay, then it will reproduce the experimental ground state energy. Okay, and that already shows you that roughly, very crudely, on an average, one single electron screens roughly 30% of the nuclear charge in a helium atom. Okay, so this is just to give you some physical insight into this. But then this also opens up another very interesting idea, that now I can start choosing this Ze as a variational parameter. So I have some arbitrary charge, screen charge, I do not know, but I'll just assume that it is something. Then I will calculate this E0, E1 I calculated, etc. And then I can keep adding all the perturbation terms, etc. So I'll start getting energy correction in terms of the Z squares, etc. Okay, and then I'll see all of these corrections, whatever it is. If I change Ze, just treat it like a mathematical parameter and change it from 0 to 2, let's say. Okay, then somewhere I should get a energy minima, and the physical system should always capture the energy minima. Okay, and that's the idea behind what is called this variational principle. Okay. So that is what I'm going to discuss next, basically. So Ze can also be used as a variational principle parameter, whose value can be optimized for finding the minimum energy possible, and the system will have invariably the minimum energy possible. So that's the law of nature. All systems typically try to go to the local minima in energy, and that gives is a trick for calculating this kind of ground state values, which is called the variational parameter method. That is number one. And then there's another way of deciding Vr actually. So you can think of Vr as something which will be let's say R dependent. Okay, makes sense, right? So near the nucleus I should not have any effect of the screening, etc. So at R goes to 0 I should have the full potential of the nucleus, and as R goes to infinity, if I calculate the single particle potential, etc., then the other electron is close to the nucleus, etc., it should completely screen out the nuclear charge by 1 unit basically. So as R goes to infinity, this should become Z minus 1 divided by R. Okay, or net charge of the nucleus is reduced by 1. So we will come to this again in the central force, central field approximation, etc., for multiple electrons. Okay, but this is roughly what I wanted to broadly qualitatively say about the helium atom energy levels, and we will explicitly do both of these calculations, perturbative and variational, in the next class. Okay, so is there a question? Okay, so if there is no question, then I have a question basically. Let's say suppose I consider electron-electron interactions. Okay, so I switch on, then can I guess that will the para states or the ortho states will have more energy? So it's a question for you. You need to come up with a solution, or at least try. Think with me. So electron-electron interaction, right? What happens if the electrons come together basically? Then the energy is largest. Then the correction of the electron-electron interaction is largest, right? So in the para state, can the electrons come, very close to each other? Or take the same quantum state, let's say. Yes, no.
Yes, sir.
And what about ortho states? In the ortho states, can they come very close to each other or take the same quantum state? Ortho states meaning the wave function, total wave function, space part of the wave function is antisymmetric, right? So it is like psi1 R1 times psi2 R2 minus psi2 R1 times psi1 R2, right? So if the electrons come together, etc., then one goes to 2, etc., and psi minus or the ortho state vanishes as R1 becomes equal to R2, right?
Yes, sir.
So in the ortho state, basically electrons keep away from each other. Okay, otherwise they will just kill the whole wave functions basically. So in the ortho states, electrons are generally more separated, etc. If they are more separated, then the potential energy is lower, and because of that, the ortho states will have lower energy because the interaction energy is positive, right? So lower positive energy, meaning total lower energy basically. Okay, so ortho states have lower energy.
Sir, can it be interpreted in terms of spin as well?
Sure,
No?
yeah. So because the total wave function has to be antisymmetric, right?
Sir, I was thinking that instead of looking at the wave function part, can we come up with an explanation purely on the basis of spin of ortho and para, that which have lower energy?
Regarding lowering of energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can, but that will involve spin-spin interaction, etc., right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. So so that's a good line of thought, no doubt, actually. Yeah, okay. So let me show you a figure which was meant for slightly later, but let's come to this right now. Okay. So let me just, yeah. So, okay. So there's a picture for, hydrogen atom itself, let's say. Okay. So, or for helium atom, let's say. Okay. So 2-level system basically, right? So here I have 2 electron level. So E1 plus E2 are 1 electron energy. So the, N1 L1 and N2 L2 is the here. So this is the independent electron approximation. That is what we did, broadly. Okay. And then you do the central force field plus antisymmetry of the wave function, etc., or you include sort of in some sense the electron-electron interaction and antisymmetry of the wave function. Okay, so that if you do, then that gives you rise to this sort of kind of splitting. Okay, and this I'm showing you just to compare the order of magnitude. Okay, and this level of splitting, let's say, then the Coulomb potential we have used for everything, etc., central force field, etc. So there will be deviations from it, etc., or the perturbation actually to the central force Hamiltonian, etc. So that gives rise to further splittings which are one order smaller, let's say. Okay, and then comes the fine structure splitting, which is the spin-spin splitting or spin and orbital splitting, etc. Okay, so this is like level 0, this is like level 1, level 2, and level 3. Okay, and then after this there is this Lamb shift and hyperfine also. So level 4 and level 5. Okay, so what you are talking about is level 3, and what I was discussing is level 1. So this is more prominent actually.
Okay, sir. Yeah, sure.
Okay. So I hope that answers the question. Okay, so this splitting will be something of the order of a few electron volts. Okay, and this fine structure splitting, etc., will be of the order of at least 0.1 electron volt or something like that. Okay, so there's a lot of magnitude difference between the spin splittings and this splitting basically. Okay, so the electrostatic interactions cost much more energy than the LS kind of a coupling or SS kind of a coupling basically. Okay, So that's the important part actually. Okay. So if you just think in terms of the electronic wave function, then at psi minus, I cannot have electrons coming, very close to each other because the wave function completely collapses, etc. So the ortho states, the electrons tend to, stay away from each other, and that has on an average lower energy. Okay. And that we had already seen in this figure. Where did my figure go? Okay. So figure is below this actually. Okay. Okay, so these are spin singlets or spin antisymmetric. So space symmetric, let's say. So para states, and this side is spin triplet or ortho states. Okay, so for the ortho states, you see this, 2,3s is smaller energy than 2,1s, and predominantly this splitting, which is of the order of 1 eV. Okay. Yeah, so which is of the order of 1 eV. So all of these units are in units of eV, etc. is primarily coming from this electron-electron interaction, electrostatic interaction. Okay, and this I could have just guessed, not the order of magnitude, but the fact that this should happen as long as you think in terms of wave function and anti-symmetrized wave functions, basically. Okay, so the spatial antisymmetric wave functions do not allow the electrons to come together, and consequently the Coulomb interaction energy is lower. Okay, so that gives rise to a very important concept basically in physics, which is the symmetrization or anti-symmetrization of the wave function leads to sort of a coupling between the spin and the space variables of the electrons, basically. Okay, and that is almost like saying that the electrons feel a force whose sign depends on the spin part of the wave function. No, so if the spin triplet is there, then the wave function will be a symmetric, and if the spin is a triplet, then the wave function will be anti-symmetric, and so on. Okay, and this gives rise to in a lot of places you will hear what is called a exchange force, and this is also the origin of Pauli exclusion principle, if you like. Okay, and this exchange force, when coupled to electron-electron interactions, is what gave rise to this splitting that we just talked about between the, let's say, ground state also. So 2,1s and 2,3s state, basically. Okay. Okay. And the ground state, of course, we saw that it was unique, etc. Because I cannot have multiple channels in the ground state, right? Ground state, I need to have only one wave function, etc. And that was basically, where did I miss the ground state? Yeah. So in the ground state, I can only have the psi plus state or the ortho state. I cannot have a sorry. So only the para state basis. So psi plus state, which is symmetric. So only the para state I can have, and ortho state I cannot have. But for all the other higher excited states, I can have ortho, para, everything. And for those, the ortho states are slightly shifted lower in energy. Okay. So that's important. Okay. So great, but we are going very slow. Okay, but yeah, let's go slow. No issues. Okay. Okay. So that was single electron systems, etc. Now let's go to multi-electron system, more than 2 electrons, etc. And all of this, let's do some analysis, and then we will do explicit calculations. Okay. So the broad picture is here, let's say. So I have a nucleus of charge Ze, and more than 1 electron. So in general, n electron. And then these are the whole series of terms that should be ideally solved for, etc. Okay. So I'll have the kinetic energy of electrons. I'll have the Coulomb interaction for electrons and atoms, right? So Z E square by 4 pi epsilon naught R term. Then I'll have a Coulomb interaction for electron-electron interactions. So E square by 4 pi epsilon naught R12 kind of a term. So these three we have been talking about till now for the helium atom, etc. And the terms which we have not talked about explicitly are the spin orbit interaction. So the total angular momentum and the total spin should be interacting with each other, etc. So spin orbit interaction. Then I have more than one spin of the electrons, etc. Right? So I should have spin interactions, etc. And then, of course, I'll have relativistic corrections. So spin orbit interaction at the individual electron level. Then I'll start having radiative correction, or this lamp shift, etc., which comes from quantum vacuum of electromagnetic radiations, basically interacting with the atomic energy levels, and making the radius of the electron sort of finite, etc. Then I had, corrections which come from the nucleus, nuclear spin and nuclear finite size, etc. Right? So the electric quadrupole and the magnetic dipole and so on, etc. So the hyperfine terms. So this is the big picture, etc. So, and it's a absolutely, very messy picture to solve basically. Okay. And half of the Jekyll-Chen's book is devoted to solving this problem. Actually summarizing the solution of this problem. Okay. And the solution, of course, it's a big problem. So it is important to realize that the solution has to be built in stages. Okay. So first we saw the hydrogen atom. Then in terms of hydrogen atom, we got an understanding of the helium atom, etc. And then we can start playing around and things like that. Okay. So this is a reasonably involved problem. And the best way to approach is, as you do anything big in physics, etc., you break it down into parts basically, which is like the divide and conquer strategy. Okay. Okay. So to do this, break it into parts, let's work for now with only the first three terms, basically kinetic energy of electrons, attractive Coulomb interaction of electron nucleus, and the repulsive Coulomb interaction of the electron-electron system. So these are the only three terms which we'll work with, etc. Okay. And then I get this diagram again. So this is just to highlight the order of magnitude of these terms, etc. So the relative energy splitting. So independent electron approximation. And now we will discuss in detail the central force field plus antisymmetry of the wave function. That will give rise to this concept of a central potential and what will be called a Slater determinant wave function, okay, for multi-electron system. So these two physics will already give you this kind of an energy splitting, which is of the order of electron volts, as we just saw for the helium atom, etc. And then, of course, I will write this in terms of a central field Hamiltonian plus some perturbation, etc., which is the non-central field part of the Coulomb interaction, etc. And that gives rise to further splitting. Okay. And then after this, we have this LS coupling, fine structure splitting, which is coming from relativistic corrections and so on, so forth. And then after this, we have the Lamb shift and the hyperfine splitting, which are not even marked here, basically. Okay. So there's a big picture to keep in mind. And another big picture to keep in mind is this. So, one nucleus, many electrons, we are solving for all energy levels. And these are broadly, these are the terms that I need to include. And these are the terms which, when we had included for the hydrogen atom system, gave me a good results, basically, except that here I have this Coulomb interaction for electron-electron interactions as an extra term. Okay. Okay. So then let's go and write down the whole problem of, only the electronic part of the multi-electron Hamiltonian problem. So H is basically sum over I1 to n minus h square by 2m del 2 Ri minus z square by 4 pi epsilon naught Ri. Okay. And this assumes that nucleus is at an origin and it is a point particle. Simple. So I'll not consider the finite size of the nucleus, no spins, etc. So very simple approximation. And then there's only one additional term, which is this e square by 4 pi epsilon Rij. The sum is over I and j, such that the j, or rather I is less than j. Okay, so j varies from 1 to n and I is less than j. This is just so that, we do not count the same pair of spin. So one electron interacting with itself, basically. So those kind of terms we do not count. Okay. And several books will show you another way of writing this is basically, so suppose I, have an interaction between 1 and 2 electron, then that is identical to 2 and 1 electron. So I do not double count that basically. For that, I will write sum over I and j. Both of them go from 1 to n, and I not equal to j, and ij and ji are identical. So divided by half basically. Okay. So that's another way of writing this electron-electron interaction term basically. So that's the big problem to solve, big picture, but only three terms basically. So, reduced problem to solve from the already very big total problem, etc. And this H, if I take, then this acts on a wave function, which is a multi-component wave function, etc. So in general, it coordinates q1, q2, qn, etc., which combine the continuous Ri, the spatial coordinates, and the discrete spin variables, basically. Okay, is equal to S psi is equal to E psi. Okay, and the psi is the multi-electron wave function. So that's the most important concept that we have introduced till now. Okay, so multi-electron wave function may or may not be, we may not be able to write as product of single electron wave functions, etc. Okay, And then another important concept is that, these n electrons are indistinguishable particles basically. So I replace one electron by another, etc. I will not know the difference. Okay. And that, of course, gave rise to the fact that H is invariant under the exchange of any two particles. Indistinguishability gave rise to this permutation symmetry, and H commutes with the permutation basically. Okay. And using that, we showed that electrons, or in general any spin half particles which are fermions, etc., the total wave function should be antisymmetric. Okay. So this we are just revising. Okay. And then that gives us this kind of a problem basically. For the reduced problem, let's say we have ignored the spin, we have ignored the orbital angular momentum, which will come out of this, etc. We have this, coordinate derivative differential equation problem. So the single particle Hamiltonian plus the multi-particle, so Rij kind of shows two electron interactions, etc. times I R1 R2 Rn is equal to E psi R1 R2 Rn, etc. Okay, and this is after ignoring the electron spin. Okay. So the full equation, important to note, is not variable separable, right? Because of this Rij term basically. So this is mod of Ri minus Rj. So I can never write this Hamiltonian as a sum over Ri terms only. Right? Okay. So then it is not variable separable problem. And then I just argued that, for a two electron system, the helium atom, this 1 by Rij term can be solved using perturbation theory or variational method, etc. Okay. But for multi-electron systems, it becomes, relatively large. Perturbation method doesn't work. And variational problem also becomes extremely difficult to keep track of. Okay, because the number of variation parameters increase like anything actually, if you want to solve it realistically. So if you want to solve it in a textbook sense, etc., with a lot of approximations, etc., then of course I can set it up. But if I want to compare it through matched experimental numbers of the excitation spectrum of carbon, nitrogen, or even heavier atoms like iron, let's say, etc., then it's almost hopelessly difficult variational problem. Okay. So then the approach that is taken, etc., is that, you can follow this, that you can define a new unperturbed Hamiltonian, which broadly includes the repulsion between the electrons, and treat the additional terms, whatever is not included in that broad repulsion terms, etc., which go as a central force field, treated as perturbation. Okay. So this is very similar to the central field approximation that we were talking about in the context of helium atom. Okay. And then the idea is that the Coulomb interactions can be written as an effective and modified central force in H0. Okay. And doing this is what is called the central force approximation. Okay. So I think I'm using mixed notation. So earlier, I think I had used central field approximation. And here I'm saying central force approximation. So I'm using them identically, basically, right? So I think the actual name is central field approximation. And this scheme of solving this multi-electron problems, etc., was divided by Hartree, Fock. So Hartree and Fock, you must have heard in other contexts, etc. In fact, we will have a separate lecture for Hartree and Fock method for determining some potential, etc. And J.C. Slater. So Slater, again, another name which you must have heard, etc., for designing antisymmetric wave functions of multi-electron wave functions as a determinant of a matrix, and the determinant wave function is actually called the Slater determinant wave function. Okay. So this is the scheme, central force approximation, and this is what we are going to discuss in the rest of the lecture. Okay. And then once you come to this calculation of the central force field, basically, then that has a lot of approximations, etc. And two, well, let's say lower level approximations, which were devised first, basically, are called the Thomas Fermi approximation and the Hartree-Fock method, basically. And we will explore these in detail. Now there are more sophisticated algorithms to do that, etc. And those we will not cover. Okay. But this is under very active development, and still today people are working on calculating the potentials which describe these atomic potentials and bring you closer to the atomic energies and other properties, etc., are very, very well studied. Okay. But the bottom line is that, the total H, so this H that we started with, etc., I can write in terms of some HC, and HC will be called a central field Hamiltonian with some effective potential VR, which is just minus Z by R plus some other R dependent part, basically, right? Which takes care of the electron-electron interactions. the radial component. So only the spherically symmetric part of the electron-electron interaction goes into Si. Okay? And that plus whatever is left, so I will just add and subtract, etc. So whatever is left, I will put into some H1, and I will call that as a perturbation, basically. Okay. So this picture. So the central force field S0, S1 splitting, etc. This sort of pink shaded region is actually this solution of H0. Okay, with the antisymmetric. Sorry, so where did I go? Yeah, so solution of this HC. Okay, so the pink shaded region is just solution of HC with the antisymmetrized wave function, basically, with the Pauli exclusion principle. Let's say that's it. Okay, and this H1 will give rise to further this splittings, etc., which are here. Okay, so this is the H1 which I'll treat perturbatively, let's say. Okay, and I can still solve all of these three, 1, 2, and third part, etc., without even considering spin orbit interactions, etc., explicitly. So this is already huge progress, right? So if the total deviation from the energy levels is like, let's say 30 eV, etc., then this sort of already captures maybe 25 eV of differences, etc. Okay, and things like that. So that's already huge progress, just treating these three terms, etc., consistently. Okay. And then the major problem in this HC is basically how to calculate this VR. Okay. And as I argued in the case of hydrogen helium atom, etc. So for large Ri and for small Ri, etc., you can easily estimate that I had, let's say, Z nucleus and N electrons, etc. Then for very large distances, let's say Rij, I can almost approximate by Ri. So I is the electron which is at a very large distance, etc. Then all of them are very far away. So I just see nucleus surrounded by an electron cloud, basically. So effective charge, if I consider this like central charge surrounded by negative charge, etc., then the total charge I see is basically Z minus N minus 1. Okay, and the total VR becomes Z minus N minus 1 divided by with a minus sign overall. Okay, so this is the most screened case, basically. So at R is equal to infinity, I'll get the most screened case. The nucleus charge is completely screened, and if Z is equal to N, which is the case for many atoms, etc., then VR just becomes one particle nucleus problem. So 1 by R as R goes to infinity. So that's one. And when R goes to zero limit, etc., then of course, the screening by the electron cloud, etc., should not play a role. I am just at the center of the charge, just outside the center of the charge, etc. And then VR should just be Z by R, basically. So these are the two limits. And of course, this will just having these will not work. This is just to give you a physical picture of where we start and where we go, etc. And in the middle, we have to construct something. So this will allow for intelligent guesses, etc. But if you want to explicitly do calculation or consistent physically intuitive theories, etc., then we do either Thomas Fermi theory or Hartree-Fock approximation. And then other than this, there are more involved tricks, basically. Okay. Okay. So then let's go back to our problem, which assumes that VR can be calculated. Okay, so let's assume that VR will be calculated, etc. We will explicitly do two of this method, Hartree-Fock and Thomas Fermi method, etc. But if I assume that VR can be calculated, okay, then I have Hc plus H1, where Hc just becomes the central force field. So H square minus H square by 2m del 2 Ri plus V of Ri. Okay. And this is just a sum of several single particle Hamiltonian with a screen potential, which has only the radially symmetric part of the screen potential. Okay, and H1 is all the terms that are not there in Hc, etc. So I'll have a minus V Ri, of course, and then I had a nucleus interaction, so minus Z by Ri. Times E square by 4 pi epsilon naught. Sometimes I am missing writing them. So minus Z by Ri times E square by 4 pi epsilon naught. Okay, so that is summed over all the electrons. So individual HIs. And then of course I had this electron-electron interaction minus E square by 4 pi epsilon naught R Ij. Okay, so this is like Sc is now become a single particle Hamiltonian, sum of several single particle Hamiltonians, etc. And the perturbation still is a many particle perturbation, etc., in the sense that it involves R1J, etc. So I at least need 2 electron wave functions, etc., to solve this. Okay. And yeah, so this is a many particle. So I start with HC. I find it the single particle wave functions, etc. And then those single particle wave functions I can use to construct the many particle wave functions, symmetrized, anti-symmetrized, etc., etc., and use those anti-symmetrized wave function, which are the many particle wave function, to calculate the expectation value of H1. So that's the calculation scheme basically, if I have that. And if I solve this, then I will already get the first part, second part, and third part of the this figure that I just showed basically. Okay, so this energy splittings, if I just follow the scheme correctly and I solve, I'll get this part gray. I'll get this central force field plus asymmetry of the wave function, anti-symmetry of this part, and the perturbation H1. If I solve, I'll already get this third part also in the big picture. Okay, and that's it basically. So you have the scheme. Now we just need to do explicit calculations. Okay. Okay. But before we go, so the explicit calculations we will do in the next class, etc. But before we go, let's see. So what did I do here? Mathematically, almost trivial, no? I had an equation, I just added and subtracted one term in the Hamiltonian. So mathematically, that's what you did, okay? But physically, what did you do? Physically, we wrote down a many particle non-perturbative H, right? In terms of screened single particle HC. And screened single particle HC, I know how to solve and how to construct many particle wave functions out of that, okay? Plus, I wrote down a many particle perturbation term. Okay, so that's one thing I did physically. Then another thing I did physically is, the spherical or the what is called the central part of the screening, meaning which is only R dependent part of the screening, that goes into VR, right? And that may be like 80% of the screening, let's say, or 90% of the screening. Okay, and the non-spherical part of the screening, etc., which is left in the perturbation. Okay, so my starting point already includes 80% of the electron-electron interaction, let's say. Okay, so that's already a good starting point, etc. And the remaining non-spherical part of the electron-electron interactions, etc., I'll treat perturbatively. So that is bound to work by design, basically, right? Unless, the major part of the electron-electron interaction is coming from non-spherical part. Okay, so if that is not the case, then this is bound to work. And we know from experience that this works for at least our periodic table very, very well. So the major part of the electron-electron interactions is actually captured by the spherical part. Okay, so this is very, very important. And so if you think physically in that sense, then it starts making very, lot of sense, basically. Okay. Okay. Then there are some subtle points, etc. Okay. And the subtle point is, let's say, for, let's say, different electrons in different energy levels, etc., right? The shape of the orbital wave function, etc., changes. And when I calculate this VRI expectation value, etc., so it should actually change with the, which orbital I am considering and so on. So this is a very important point, that the same effective VR cannot account for the full spectrum of the complex ion. So for the excited states, I may have to treat VR slightly differently. For the ground states, etc., we may have to treat it slightly differently, etc. So that's a subtlety which comes out of this. And I just wanted to mention this subtle point. So I may have to form different VR approximations for the ground states and the excited states, etc. Okay. But that's roughly the approximate scheme. That's the most of the physics that we have, etc. And now we will use this broad idea that we have to actually do calculations. But having this broad idea is very, very important. And more important is we had a large problem and we, broke it down into several terms, etc. And we know that, 90% of the effect is going to come from the first three terms, etc. So in this set of lectures, this first three terms, we will just, solve completely. And then, yeah, the rest of the terms we can, do later or just, read up in Jeku-Chen's book, basically. Okay. That's the broad idea. So before we end for today, few more things, basically. So let's come back and, yeah. So just the HC, basically, or the central part of the Hamiltonian, etc., decide the eigenfunctions to use for the calculation. And that's a central field problem. Okay. So SC psi C is just given by sum over single particle wave functions, etc. is equal to E psi C. And I can do the same variable separable trick, right? So if the Hamiltonian is the sum over several terms, etc., then the wave function is product of individual wave functions, etc., right? So psi C I can construct as product of wave functions. So U1, U2, U3, etc. So this AI is denote the total quantum number which will come out of the problem in a while. Okay. And full wave function is just if the H is just the sum of our HIs, then the full wave function is just a product of the wave functions, etc. Okay. And the important part of this is that, VRI is just the central force field. So this problem is just, identical to that of the hydrogen atom problem, or for the problem of any central force field, basically, right? So the angular part is, still given by, the solution is given by the spherical harmonics. So L and ML will, coming from the spherical harmonic part of the solution, are still good quantum numbers till now. So for the terms that we have kept till now, etc. And of course, the radial part will give me another quantum number, which will decide the principal energy levels, or N, basically. Okay. So for this problem also, we already know without solving that N, L, and ML are sort of good quantum numbers. Okay. So UAIs, so the wave function for which I wrote a general notation, etc., are actually wave functions in terms of U, N, L, and ML of R. Okay. And that's the single particle wave function. So minus S square by 2m del 2 R plus VR times UNL R is given by ENL UNLM R. Okay. And this is a generic single particle equation for a central force problem. And, like always, N will take values 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. L will take values, 0 to N minus 1, and M or ML takes values from minus L to plus N, and so on. And yeah, so just finally, before concluding, I wanted to mention that U and LM are not the hydrogenic wave functions, okay? Because the VR may be slightly different. It may not be minus Z by 4 pi epsilon naught R, etc. Okay, so U and LM are generic wave functions, not the hydrogen wave function. That is number one. And then for 1 by R potential, okay, if VR I choose as 1 by R, etc., then E almost maps on En, etc. That is the hydrogen atom problem, basically, right? So then En does only depends on the N eigenvalue, okay? But this is not true for a general central force problem. And if I have a generic VR, then E will start depending on both N and L, actually, okay? And that is very important, actually, okay? And because of that, we were having this splitting. So different total angular momentum, S and S different values, I will already start having splitting, basically, okay? Because of the, that. Okay. That is, yeah. So I'll just stop here, basically. And in the next week, we'll just see, how this VR is derived or calculated, use approximate methods to calculate the ground state of helium atom, perturbation and variation. So 2 methods we'll do explicitly, etc. And once we have derived this VR, etc., or yeah, then we will also add spin orbit terms or spin-spin interaction terms into the mix there. Okay. And before going to this, we will also do the anti-symmetrization of the wave function, which we have not done till now. So the Slater determinant wave function we will define on Monday morning, let's say. Okay. So I'll stop here for today. If you have any questions, you can ask me.